Slime, Haritora, Mokopi, Tundra, and of course Vive. If you want full body tracking these days, you've got plenty of options. But these are different. These are Axis trackers made by Refract Technologies, an IMU-based tracking solution oriented in the motion capture and VR gaming space. Refract sent me these to talk about. But like everything on this channel, my opinions are completely my own. I've been testing these quite a bit. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about here, and oh boy is there a sizable amount of bad to balance it out. First, we will talk about their kit as a whole, then we will crack them open to see what's actually making them tick, and along the way you'll see exactly why I call these things Mokopi on crack. In the box, you get the nodes in their charging dock/case, similar to Mokopi. There's an assortment of straps with this mental hospital grippy sock material on the back to keep them from moving around. One of these straps is different than the others, and we will talk about that in a second. There's also these silicone cases that slide onto the straps. Also a dongle, which if you know anything about IMUs, this little guy is important to keep latency down, and I'm happy to see it here. The setup is super easy. Plug in the included dongle, download the Axis Control Center, and click the pairing mode icon in the top right of the window. Grab nodes out of the dock and put them in pairing mode by pressing and holding the power button until you feel 2 pulses from the haptic feedback motor. Yes, haptic feedback motor. We will talk about that more in a second. Now just drag and drop the nodes onto whatever location you're going to put them on. With all of them paired up, it's time to do the magneto calibration. This is a really important step for any IMU setup because it's how they start understanding their environment to track accurately. On most IMU systems, this requires a tedious process. Here's how you do it with Axis. For this quick demo, I'll be putting Axis trackers just above and below my elbows, one on my chest, and pairs on my thighs and shins. Then my phone is going on my hip using this belt. Just like Mokopi, this kit uses your phone, but in a completely different way and isn't strictly necessary. The purpose of your phone here is to use the augmented reality features of your phone to anchor your hip in the real world. It's kind of like having a base station on your hip. Please keep in mind that what you're seeing here is pre 1.0 release software, so some of this could change. Time to show these in a real-world scenario. We need guns. Since our upper body matters the most for something like this, I'll be repurposing my shin nodes as hands and ditching the phone in favor of another Axis node. An AR-15, a handgun, and finally a classic pump action. This was a lot more frustrating to do than I expected. The IMUs would just float off, and I know exactly why. This is the same reason why some people get amazing tracking with IMUs, and why some people get horrible tracking, even with the same parts. IMUs partly rely on magnetic sensors to understand where they are, so having them close to a lot of magnetic metals like a fucking gun can really throw things for a trip. This is why IMUs drift. Guitar pickups are extremely magnetic, headphone and speaker drivers are also really hot, and in my room instead of my studio, these things tracked way better after I downloaded a magnetic sensor app on my phone and moved these weights further away from my play space. No matter what IMU you use, whether it's Haritora, Slime, or these Axis trackers, you need to be conscious of your magnetic environment. That's why in Axis's own demos, they are in environments with no visible metal. At the end of the day, I still got decent blockouts that require some cleanup. If you were to animate this by hand, you'd be spending hours to accomplish what I just did in less than 5 minutes with a phone, laptop, and some IMUs, even in a worst case scenario. These things are absolutely indispensable for a small studio. The best part, this level of motion capture can be achieved for $750 with the phone that's already in your pocket and the PC that you've already got. That is still a ton of money to throw around, but when you consider that a single motion capture IMU from competitors like OptiTrack cost $550, it makes these look like a steal. Traditional motion capture also involves entire studios worth of gear. Special suits, gloves, shoes, funny looking hats, and a shitload of marker dots. Now, most of you watching this aren't looking for a mocap setup, and yes, $750 is truly a lot of money for anything full body. Luckily, Refract is launching a 4-node version called Axis Lite, made specifically to be more affordable for VR gaming. And using these nodes with their software, we can emulate some Steam VR trackers. Kinda. Here's where these trackers kind of fall flat on their face. I have used every configuration that I can think of. With the 4-node kit, Refract wants you to wear them on your thighs and shins. And this is the hip bug, something that both myself and others have been experiencing with the 4-node kit. They actually track pretty alright besides that bug, and Axis is working on that right now. I tried the 4-node kit with my old phone and a WoTrack as a hip tracker through Slime VR, while the 4 Axis nodes emulate 2 feet trackers instead. This stopped the hip bug but introduced some latency in my hip, which gave me some weird physics. It was alright at best, but I want you to watch my feet right here. I just got done doing a bunch of jumping jacks to utterly confuse these things, and after a brief moment, the IMUs just autocorrect. This is the brilliance behind Axis. Even though the current tracking algorithm in Steam VR is pretty jank, this is really cool. Their autocorrection algorithm has worked for me every single time without fail, even if I land in a really dumb position. But it's safe to say that they have some work to do on the Steam VR side of things. Even wearing 8 trackers, one on my chest, hip, and my legs fully covered, giving these things the best chance to work by giving them a full upper body to work with, the tracking in VR chat is alright at best. My friend here is using subpar MPUs with Slime's tracking algorithm and getting better results for about $150 total. But that's entirely a software issue, and let me show you why. I'm really not sure if Refract wants me to do this on camera, but here we go. Opening these things up is super easy. 4 Allen head screws on the back. No Torx bits, no security bits. There's not even a sticker over any fasteners for Axis to know that you opened them up in order to invalidate your warranty. But shh, inside, a Wi-Fi controller that transmits data to the dongle, a relatively small battery which only gets you about 4 hours of battery life, and there's clearly room for improvement there. Here's our neat little haptic feedback motor. An O-ring and a rubber diaphragm on the button seals up the trackers to avoid any sweat damage during your ERP sessions. And then this guy. And this is where the Micopi comparison ends. This right here is the magical IMU. This is the exact same IMU that Slime VR uses in their official trackers, and what they recommend for you to use if you build your own. In an IMU tracker, there are 3 things that are really important to avoid drifting and latency. First, the IMU itself. Duh. You need an IMU that can understand its positioning accurately, and Axis has that covered. And of course, keep your magnetic environment in check by removing as much magnetic interference as you can. Then you need to transmit that positioning data quickly. Thanks to the ESP32 boards in the nodes in the dongle, Axis has that covered very well, resulting in very little latency. To give you an idea of just how accurate and responsive these are, Refract put together a little game called Virtual Taekwondo. It's an official Olympic esport, where they use these trackers exclusively to track some of the fastest and most powerful kickers in the world. Then there's the intangible. The software. It takes the data from the IMU and tries to make sense of it on your hopefully human skeleton. Just like when Micopi first launched, motion capture looks good, but the Steam VR tracking is god-awful. The Axis hardware at a core level is on par with or even better than what Slime uses to achieve great full-body tracking, and completely destroys Micopi with haptic feedback to boot. Axis at its roots was meant to be a motion capture system first, and they are only recently getting to the Steam VR part of things, while Slime VR was made first and foremost to be great for things like VR chat. They were both made for different things using the same core components. Thankfully, Refract is very much a consumer-first company, and they genuinely want these trackers to be something that people can mess with, leaving the very real possibility of using these with Slime's tracking algorithms to fully unlock their potential in games like VR chat. And with haptic feedback. I mean, if you're gonna wear a tracker anyway, it might as well double as a haptic feedback motor, right? I know you degenerates would love that. These Axis trackers will one day be amazing, and to prove it, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. So I have a proposition to make. I know a lot of really talented and smart people watch this channel, so I have 2 bounties. The first person to get these working nicely with Slime VR, you get $100. And if you can get their haptic feedback working through OSC and avatar contacts, there's another $100 on the table. When I reached out to my contact at Refract to make sure this was alright, my boy Hamza went straight to the CEO and the dev team. And instead of shooting it down, they're doubling the pots. That's $200 if you can get these working nicely in Slime VR, and $200 if you can get their haptics working well in VR chat via avatar contacts and OSC. Happy hunting. With those 2 things in place, these trackers will be unlike anything else on the market. The hardware is here, now's the time for software. If nobody claims the bounties, Axis already has this functionality on their list of to-dos. I just want to see it sooner. If you are interested in picking up a 4-node set of their trackers, you can use my code SMALLPP to get $62 off. A huge thank you to Icarus Dragon, Inter, Penpal, Fox, Ori Galili, Zany, and Yeti VC for joining the Patreon, as well as all of my other Patreon supporters. Without you, I wouldn't be able to invest back into the community. Thank you all so much.